So we've already talked about adding fractions together. So now I want to talk a little bit about subtracting fractions. The nice thing for us is that it works exactly the same. When we're subtracting fractions, we're going through the same process. Now, the first thing again I like to do is I like to think about what sort of answer should I be expecting here. I have 5 and 5/8, which is just a little bit bigger than 5 and a half. I'm going to say just because it's bigger than a half, I'm going to round that up to 6. And then I'm going to say 2 and a fourth. A fourth is less than half because 2/4 would be half. So I'm going to say that's closer to 2. 6 minus 2 is about 4. So I'm going to be expecting some answer about 4 here. Now, remember when we have unlike denominators, which we have here, the first thing we're going to do is find common denominators. 8 and 4 are my denominators. So my common denominator is going to be eighths. Remember, a fourth is double the size of an eighth, so it should take twice as many. It should take twice as many to make a fourth. So I'm going to make this fourth into eighths. Multiply by 2, twice as big, times 2, and I get 2/8. So just to write that down, I have 5 and 5/8, and I find it helpful to rewrite your numbers, just because sometimes people get confused. 1/4 is the same as 2/8. So I'm just going to subtract here. 5 minus 2 wholes gives me 3 wholes, and 5/8 minus 2/8 gives me 3/8. So I come up with a total of 3 3/8, which is just a little bit smaller than 3 and a half, because remember 3 4/8 would be half. So the only other thing we might encounter is something that looks like this. And I want to tell you what's different here. Now, you should generally notice this from the start. You'll notice that in this case, I am subtracting two fractions, one of which is much bigger than the other. I have 1/12 as my first number, and I am subtracting away 5/6. Hopefully, you can realize that 5/6 is almost a whole. 1/12 is much closer to being 0. So I'm going to have a problem here, and we're going to talk about what to do in the case of this problem. So just like before, I'm going to find my common denominator, which is going to be 12 in this case. I'm going to make my sixth into twelfths. Again, a twelfth is half the size of a sixth. A sixth is 2 times bigger. So I'm going to multiply 6 times 2 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10 twelfths. So I'm going to rewrite that. 2 and 1/12 minus 1 and 10 twelfths. Now, we have a fairly large problem here. We can't take 10 twelfths away from 1/12. So just like when you subtract with whole numbers and you use the concept of regrouping, we do the same thing with fractions, and I'm going to tell you where it's going to come from. So what I'm going to do in this case, and I'll use a different color, what I'm going to do is I am going to take away from my whole. I'm going to take away from that 2. I'm going to take away one whole, which is going to leave me with one remaining whole. Now, if I take away a whole, I have completely and totally changed this problem. I have taken a whole out of this problem. If I take something away, I have to replace it with something of equal value. It's kind of like taking $10 from somebody, a $10 bill, and replacing it with 10 $1 bills. You are replacing it with something of equal value. So what I took away was a whole. I'm going to replace it with a whole. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Because my denominator is twelfths, I'm going to replace it with 12 twelfths. I took away a whole. I replaced it with 12 twelfths. Those two things are the same. I haven't changed the problem. I already, though, have 1/12. So I always just draw a box around these to show that I'm going to put them together. 1/12 and 12 twelfths gives me 13 twelfths. Now, I just want to prove to you that we haven't changed anything. I have 1 and 13 twelfths. 1 and 13 twelfths. Remember, 12 twelfths is a whole. So that extra whole would give me 2. And if 12 twelfths is a whole, I'm going to have 1 extra. Would get me 2 and 1/12. That is the number that we started with. So we haven't changed anything. We've just changed the way that it looks. So at this point, I have 1 and 13 twelfths minus 1 and 10 twelfths, which is going to give me 1 minus 1 is nothing. 13 twelfths minus 10 twelfths is 3 twelfths. And that fraction actually will simplify. 3 twelfths is the same as 1 fourth. And to get that, we can divide each of those by 3. And we would get a grand total of 1 fourth there. The big idea here is taking a whole away and replacing it with something of equal value. Let's give this a shot, and hopefully this concept of regrouping works for you.